inform our out-of-province drivers of this significant change. The department needs to work with all car rental agencies in the province to get that message out, to get that information out to drivers, especially those from outside of our province. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I was glad to hear the Minister talking about the significant change and how critical it is to, take the appropriate time that's needed in order to reach out to all our drivers in the province and to drivers from outside the province that will be driving on our roads, Mr. Speaker. So again, I welcome the Minister's comments about how critical it is to get, before any change is made, time is needed in order to get this word out to all our drivers. So with those few notes, I will take my seat.
The honourable member for Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wonder if the Minister might be kind enough to furnish us with maybe a copy of all the areas that would be affected at some point. I'm sure it will come out at some point anyway, but I think that would be helpful. I think this legislation has some benefits, certainly probably in some areas more so than others. When I say that, I mean certain locations may benefit from the legislation in maybe in a better way when it comes to practical terms. I do worry a little bit about the practicality in some rural areas where schools may already be at a significant distance from roads. Because I think of a number of areas in my own constituency where the traffic is flowing through, and it's quite a distance from the schools. And I guess I just worry. I know 30 kilometers an hour is not a significant adjustment if you're in an urban area, but if you're in a rural area where the school is quite a distance from the road, it might not be as practical as it may appear when we look at it here in the legislature in its legislative form. And I also think about potential for giving people a false sense of safety. People need to respect our highways. And I know that I suppose it does make a difference if a vehicle is traveling at 30 kilometers versus 50. I've actually been hit by a car myself when I was younger. I still have a scar on my leg from it. And I got, Dr. Burney gave me, I think it was 54 stitches in my thigh, and I still have the mark there. But thankfully, I think it was a Chevette or an Acadian. So thankfully, it was a small car. But the person at fault in that instance was actually myself, and it was kind of blizzard-like conditions, and I was running down the driveway and kind of lost track of where I was. Before I knew it, there was a car coming at me, and I thought, I'm going to beat that car, and I almost did. So obviously there's a lot of importance around the safety of this to make sure if other young people are around roadways that they still respect the roadway. And of course, motorists, if there's the risk that somebody could come on the road, I can certainly see the logic behind the bill. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will take my place.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did want to put the honourable member's mind at ease, because the bill does make provision that this is for areas where the school zone immediately, the speed limit immediately preceding the school zone is 50 kilometers per hour will drop down to 30. So it will not be the case that all areas will drop down according to the information we've received on the bill. Anyway, the minister will remember that earlier this fall I tabled a petition in this House from the Basin View Community School community. It wasn't just the parents at the the school who signed the petition asking that the speed limit drop down to 30 kilometers. It was residents from around the neighboring area. Earlier, shortly after I was elected, I had met with a group from the school, and they were concerned that not a lot of children were walking to school. And there were a variety of reasons for that, but one of them along Basin View Drive was, in fact, the speed that drivers were coming along, and that there aren't sidewalks on both sides of the road all the way along. Oddly enough, we did have a concern for a while about coyotes because they were making an appearance in the area, but that seems to have abated somewhat, although I don't think the Minister of Natural Resources should take credit for that with the coyote call. I think it was just, you know, a crash of the rabbit population that was forcing the coyotes out of their natural area. But one of the things that the parents particularly identified was that children were not walking to school because their parents were concerned about the speeds around the school. And so in the spring, they launched a petition, and at various events at the school, they had folks sign that petition. And I think this is a good bill. Again, what will be key, whether it is efficacious or not, is education. We have to make sure that all our drivers understand what the new rules are, and the member for Clare was quite right. Where people are renting cars at the airport when they're coming across the border, and or someday when we have a ferry in Yarmouth again, when they get off the ferry in Yarmouth, it will be important to make sure that people coming into the province will need to know what the rules are here in Nova Scotia, that they may not be the same as their province. But it's important to note that the trend in recent years is an increase in numbers of cars dropping students off at school. And that's in part because everybody's in a rush. It's also in part because we've got less busing of students. Courtesy busing has been reduced, and in fact, the Nova Scotia Department of Health and Wellness reported that from 2001 to 2005, grade 3 students walking to school dropped by 10%. So we know that fewer students are walking to school. We want to encourage the physical activity of walking to school. If in fact students are supposed to be getting an hour of exercise a day, they could get a good chunk of that walking to and from school. With car use going up, we want to make sure that our students are protected, and this drop in speed in school zones is recommended. It's supported by Transport Canada and Safe Kids Canada. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Minister for bringing this bill forward, because if he hadn't, I would have. And as we've discussed previously, and I thank him for his careful attention to the detail around the implementation of this bill. Thank you.
The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I did not speak on second reading, so I do want to take an opportunity to say to the Minister that I want to congratulate him on this piece of legislation. It does something that every parent and citizen of the province wants to do, and that's to enhance the standard of care that we provide for our young people. And whether you are a parent or a teacher or a resident passing through a school zone, the radar needs to be on its highest alert, because we have little people who are darting hither and yon around the school. And for those of us who have been administrators on a playground, you only breathe easily after you know that every student is in their class and the door is shut. And even then, you may have a few that come straggling in. So it is constantly on the minds of educators, of teachers, of administrators, and of crosswalking guards, and all of those people who do want to make sure that our children are safe. We've talked a bit about the number of vehicles around schools, and that more parents are dropping their kids off. And we've talked about rural and urban. And I happen to have both extremes in my riding, and a conglomerate of subdivisions. And they're a stone's throw away from the school, Mr. Speaker, but parents still drive them to school and drop them off. That may be because they've been to hockey practice and then they're getting back to school, but the fact that it's only when students have to walk a distance that they get a drive is quite misleading. And so you come across these schools and you have cars that are dropping off, kids jumping out of a vehicle, running across to meet their friends, and they don't have any regard sometimes for the traffic. And so I think anything that we can do to slow the traffic down in those school zones is positive, and as I said, I commend the minister for this piece of legislation. I also want to repeat something that my colleague has mentioned about the education component. And I've been talking to folks in my area about this particular piece of legislation. They're asking questions, will it change in my school zone, and so on. And I was quite surprised to hear some people say, well, you know what it says now, you know, in the speed zone, 50 kilometers per hour when students are present. And the number of interpretations is amazing. Some people are saying, well, that means, you know, when the kids are there getting there at 9 o'clock in the morning. Then others say, well, no, it's only Monday to Friday. And others will say, well, you know, it's only... So there are so many interpretations of when children are present, which is now posted on the signs, that I think it's imperative that we do a very good information session, not only to share with parents what the new legislation will mean, but to help parents understand, and not just parents, but drivers understand what it means when you say 50 kilometers per hour in a school zone when children are present. There you go. There are all kinds. Maybe there's a soccer practice after school and the kids are getting picked up at 6 o'clock. Well, that's a school zone and children are present. So I think we have some educating to do of the existing law and also of the change. So I would ask the minister, when he's looking at the education component for this, that he also address that, because I could not believe that there were so many interpretations. And so, you know, if there are that many interpretations, then how people adjust their driving when they're going by a school is going to be as varied as the number of interpretations. So I would simply pass that on to the minister. I think it would be worth addressing in the education component. You know, we had second reading, there were some statistics, and I think it was only one fatality in so many years in a school zone. And from my perspective, that's one too many. And I think that we need to try to ensure that we have an accident-free environment around everywhere in our highways, but this particular legislation speaks to our school zones. The second part of this is, of course, the enforcement. Once this becomes law, then you have to look at how well it's enforced. And you can be sure that there will be people who, after they've been educated, may try to run the risk, or they may think it doesn't apply to me, or they may think it's not my school zone, it's the other one, because it will vary. And as people are traveling, they're going to be going from an 80 into a 50, or they're going to be going from a 50 into a 30, and so it could be confusing for them. So I think hand in hand with the education component has to be the enforcement, because it's only as good as those who, as the implementation, and the implementation is what we really want to focus on. So I would say to the minister that I commend him for increasing the level of care that we're providing. I believe this legislation does that. I think it's a message that we need to get to our current drivers. We also need to get it into the hands of those who are in driver education programs. And I think we have a wonderful opportunity there, because if the handbooks that are used in driver ed focus on that, then the next generation of drivers that come on the road are they're not going to know anything different. They're going to have been have been trained and educated with that particular law in mind. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I would say again that I think it's legislation that's long overdue. It's important legislation, and it's one that we will support and look for the implementation. Thank you.
I recognize the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure Renewal to be the closed debate.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I thank members opposite. Not one particular member in this House, not one particular minister in the House, certainly not this Minister of Transportation, has the patent on good ideas. No comments from the House Leader, please. But I want to point out to members opposite, during the last exchange of ideas that we just had here, I've heard about the importance of contacting car rental agencies. I've heard about crossing guards that have to be consulted. Now I also hear from the member from Colchester North about driver education. All good, solid ideas that I wouldn't necessarily, as one member, think of. So I encourage members opposite to take a moment over the next few weeks, perhaps prior to Christmas, when you send me your Christmas card, include a list of some suggestions that you would like to see to make sure. No, it won't be on a napkin this time. It'll be properly done for one member opposite. But I think it's truly important that we have people with, whether you have children or grandchildren in the school system, you consult, please, make sure you have your views known, and we'll make sure that this particular bill is possibly an example of how we should do education when it comes to other campaigns across the province. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move we close debate to third reading.
The motion is for third reading of Bill number 73, the Safer School Zone Act. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Bill number 73, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you please call Bill 76, the Civil Forfeiture Act?
Bill number 76, the Civil Forfeiture Act.
Question.
The motion is for third reading of Bill number 76, the Civil Forfeiture Act. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. I can backtrack, Mr. Government House Leader. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My mistake. I should have moved third reading of Bill number 76, the Civil Forfeitures Act.
The motion is for third reading of Bill 76, the Civil Forfeiture Act. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Bill number 76, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 27 of the Acts of 2007, the Civil Forfeiture Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, could you please call Bill 78, the Civil Constables Act?
Bill number 78, the Civil Constables Act.
Mr. Speaker, I move third reading of Bill 78.
The motion is for third reading of Bill number 78, the Civil Constables Act. I'm fine. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion is carried.
Bill number 78, entitled An Act to Repeal Chapter 3 of the Acts of 1974, the Civil Constables Act.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the bill be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, could you please call Bill number 80, the Constables Act?
Bill number 80, the Constables Act.
I move third reading of Bill number 80, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is for a third reading of Bill number 80, the Constables Act. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Bill number 80, entitled An Act to Repeal Chapter 87 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Constables Act.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you please call Bill number 84, the Animal Protection Act?
Bill number 84, the Animal Protection Act. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
I move third reading, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is for third reading of Bill number 84, the Animal Protection Act. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Bill number 84, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 33 of the Acts of 2008, the Animal Protection Act.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you please call Bill number 85, the Agriculture and Rural Credit Act?
Bill number 85, the Agriculture and Rural Credit Act. I will now recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading of Bill number 85, Agriculture and Rural Credit Act.
The motion is for third reading of Bill number 85, the Agriculture and Rural Credit Act. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Bill number 85, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 7 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Agriculture and Rural Credit Act.
Order that the bill be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. Order that the bill do pass. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, that concludes the government's business for today. I know we are. Mr. Speaker, so I wish you do now rise for us to meet from the hours of noon to 6 p.m. tomorrow. And after the daily routine, we will be dealing with Bill 115 and 116. I wish you to now rise, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is for adjournment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. We will now adjourn until 12 noon tomorrow until 6 p.m.